Right, so good evening everybody. Firstly, can you hear me at the back? The public address system? Good, thank you. Welcome to the Wokingham Borough Council Planning Committee meeting of the 17th of September. Before we start, I just need to go through a few procedural issues. Please ensure your telephones are switched off or to silent. There is no fire drill planned, so if the fire alarm goes off, we will exit through those doors over there and follow us. I've just introduced the officers and key members of the committee so that you know who's talking. On my far right is Mary Severin, who is the council's solicitor, who's here to provide legal advice. Next to her is Sarah Sheikh, who is a leading Queen's Counsel and specialist in planning matters, who's here to advise us on the Tesco item that is on the agenda, the Article 4. Next to her is Susan Coulter, who is the Senior Democratic Services Officer, who is the clerk to tonight's meeting. On my immediate right is Tim Holton, who is the Vice Chairman of the Planning Committee. I'm Simon Weeks, I'm chairing the committee. And to my left is Claire Lawrence, who's Head of Development Management. And next to her is Chris Easton, who is the Service Manager for Highway Development Management, who's here to advise us on matters relating to highways and transport. And the other members of the committee are sitting on the left and right here. It's a quasi-judicial committee, so we have set procedures and conduct. The planning officer will outline the application, and then I will call in turn only those who are pre-registered to speak. If you come forward to the table here and press the grey button on the microphone, that's when your 3 minutes starts. I would remind members, members of the public, that the 3 minutes is allotted time in order for us to actually make some progress through the evening, because obviously there's often quite a lot of speakers, and that members are interested in the quality, not the quantity of what you have to say. We will enforce the 3 minute time limit. Okay. The other matter that I need to draw to your attention is that as a result of recent changes in national legislation, that this meeting is being filmed, and you will notice somebody recording it over here. This would be the first time it's formally filmed, and it will continue to be filmed at all future meetings. All members of the committee, officers and members, are part of that, included in the filming, but any members of the public who've registered to speak can ask not to be filmed, and we have some of those who've done so. But obviously, what they say will be recorded in audio only. So I don't think I've missed any key issues there, so we'll move straight on. Firstly, I'm going to, I believe, could all those that are here for the Article 4 Tesco's issue please raise their hand? Yeah, as we suspect, there's quite a few people with that. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that as the first item on the agenda, rather than its current position in the agenda, so that we can make some progress on that, and we'll then come on to the other planning applications in the sequence that they're listed. Firstly, the minutes. Are members having any issues they wish to raise on the minutes? Accuracy, I see no members indicating, so we will approve those minutes. Apologies for absence?
Just one, Chairman, and that's Councillor Chris Singleton.
Okay, Councillor Chris Singleton, that means that the 9-person committee, 8 members are present tonight. Any members have declarations of interest? Bob?
Yeah, just on 59 Ridgeway, a comment's been brought to my attention that I seem to be against the application because I've been contacted by the resident of number 63. I am actually their ward member, and they have every right to contact me and ask my advice on something. I have not predetermined this application.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, and there are no items to be deferred or withdrawn. Right. In that case, we will go straight to the Article 4. Claire, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. As members are aware, at the last planning committee, there was a resolution to serve an immediate Article 4 direction on the Maiden Over Public House to prevent the change of use under the development rights of the pub to a retail store. The reason given by members at that time was to allow, actually I will just directly quote if I may from the minutes. The reason given at that time was to allow allow the opportunity to fully assess the community benefits of the public house relative to a retail use and to allow the wider community to be consulted. Following the meeting and that resolution, Tesco, who are the lessee of the premises, have written to the council and asked that the council reconsiders the reconsiders the resolution. They are arguing that the legal tests were not met in making the Article 4 direction. We, as a council, as officers, felt it would be appropriate to look at that letter and to seek some further legal advice. And Sally Shake, who's with us this evening, provided that advice to us. That advice is available as Part 2 to members. It is being treated as confidential on the basis that if members were minded to serve an Article 4 following today's meeting, that we would not be able and we would not have to provide that information in defending our position. There is an opportunity to reconsider the resolution, and in the report, sorry, are you having, is this okay? Can you hear me? It's intermittent, in and out, so. Okay. There is an opportunity in accordance with the Constitution to allow the committee to reconsider the decision that was made at the last committee in this item. And the recommendation before you this evening is that the committee should reconsider that resolution. Just a little bit of background in terms of Article 4 directions, and this is set out in the committee report in more detail. The committee report goes through the different types of Article 4 direction, and it's important to distinguish between those two. The first one is a non-immediate Article 4 direction, and this particular process involves the consultation of, with the local community of the intention to serve the Article 4, and then for the council to consider in light of that consultation process whether or not it feels that it would like to go forward and serve that Article 4. The test in reality, the test for a non-immediate Article 4 is one of expediency, and it is expediency in terms of the planning merits of the case. So it is something that it's almost very similar type of decision-making process to considering a planning application for the change of use of the pub to a retail unit. And I'll go on and talk about the planning merits in a moment, but they are set out in more detail in the officer's report. The other issue relating to a non-immediate Article 4 is that because of the timeline involved in serving that Article 4, if Tesco's or any other retail use was to go into the store and start trading, or at least make it undertake the works which made it capable to be traded and used in a retail store, then at that stage the council would not be able to do anything if it hadn't served the Article 4 before that. So essentially what that means is that Tesco's could go in there next week. They could clear out the things within the pub that makes it eligible or able to be used in the pub, put in some shelves and the cash machine and so on, and at that stage it would be an A1 use essentially, because it could be used for that purpose. So in reality, a non-immediate Article 4 is unlikely to achieve the objective here, which is to prevent the change of use or the loss of the pub. So moving on to the next process, the next type of Article 4 is an immediate Article 4, and this is the type of Article 4 that members considered at the last committee. And the tests associated with that are that the article or the proposal, i.e. the change of use of the pub to the retail stores, should be prejudicial or would be prejudicial to the planning of the area, or constitute a threat to the amenities of the area. as you've seen in the legal advice and set out in the officer's report, it's considered, first of all, that the resolution of members in the last meeting did not address that particular test. So in the event of a challenge, it's unlikely that the council will be successful in substantiating the reason for issuing the Article 4 direction. So I think that my advice is that that's the reason why there should be reconsideration of this issue this evening. Moving from that, and I think that we need to address in assessing that test whether or not the proposal to change the use of the pub to a retail use would have an unacceptable impact on the proper planning of the area, and two, whether or not it would have an impact on amenity. They're the two tests, and you will see in the report to this committee, it has been set out what those tests are, and they're the planning tests. In particular, and I'll refer, one is policy, and it's been assessed against the policy, not just the NPPF, the core strategy, and the MDD. It then goes on and talks about traffic and highway safety, parking and residential amenity. And maybe just a little bit more on those assessments. In policy terms, the loss of a public house to a retail would not constitute the loss of a community facility. That's set out in the national guidance, but also it's the use of the premises as a retail store would meet the criteria set out in the local policies, the local development plan, because the store is located within a local retail area. So in my view, we could not substantiate a reason for refusal on policy grounds, or a reason to serve the notice on policy grounds. Secondly, and maybe Chris will go on and speak more about this, but we have assessed the proposal in terms of traffic generation and highway safety. And I will let Chris in a moment just refer a little bit more to that particular issue. But it has been considered that there will be no detrimental impact of a change of use on highway safety and traffic. Thirdly, the issue of parking, and it is considered, having assessed the scheme and the proposal against the existing lawful use of the site as a pub, that the proposal would not have an unacceptable impact upon parking and can provide sufficient parking on site to meet the needs of the retail store. And finally, in terms of residential amenity, it's considered that a retail store would be unlikely to result in significant high levels of noise and disturbance to local residents, and especially given the nature of public house use, which can be used later into the evening and tends to be used later into the evening. So on that basis, and in applying that planning assessment to the proposal to change the public house to a retail store, I'm of the view that it would not prejudice the proper planning of the area or the local amenity. And given that there is no threat, because there is no harm, that there is no immediate threat which would justify an Article 4 direction. I just wanted to refer members to the update sheet, and there are a number of additional representations made. I understand that members have received emails from various Gareth Epps and Stephen Langdon, and I haven't copied them because members have been sent that representation. And also a copy of a letter is attached from Tesco's solicitors that addresses the issue of compensation, and that is attached to the update. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Claire. Yeah, I think it would be useful if Chris could just add some issues about implications for traffic and parking.
Evening. I think really just to kind of pick up on a few points that Claire's already made. As we currently stand, the Article 4, highways would not normally get involved in this situation in relation to policy compliance and the fact that there's a change in land use from A4 to A1, which is obviously currently allowed. Obviously, in respect of the concerns that we've raised, we've had a look in case the application was to come in as a standalone application to see the impacts that it may have. In relation to the current pub as a use, this obviously is a trip attractor, it's not necessarily a trip generator. nor is a convenience store. Typically the uses will pick up a certain amount of pass-by and diverted trips on the network, more so obviously for a retail store. In looking at the trip generation, whilst there is a difference between the trip rates for a A1 and an A4 use, A1 being retail and A4 for a drinking establishment, these trip rates are the ones that are derived from the council's model, and as such, for an A1 food retail, they're probably quite robust in the sense that they're there for an A1 retail food store, such as a supermarket where you could do a weekly shop. So in seeing them applied in this scenario, the trip rates seem relatively high compared to the pub use, with the pub coming in at around, I think it's 14 to 15 vehicle trips in the PM peak, and the store being around 40 in the PM peak. Now, in relation to that, the DFT guidance, Department of Transport guidance, which sets out those for assessing developments. There's a protocol within there that we tend to follow, and there's guidance which states that developments that generate less than the net increase of 30 trips of a peak hour necessarily not required for assessment as the impact is marginal. Now, in the case of the development that we already have here, it is an existing site, it's not a new site, and therefore there is a net increase of only 26 vehicle trips in the peak hour when compared to the two land uses that we currently have. In relation to parking, the pub will require significantly more parking than currently exists with the council standards, and that comes out for the land use that we've worked out and the usable space within the pub. It generates a requirement of around 76 spaces, which is obviously, it seems obviously quite a high figure in comparison to what is currently on site now, about 22. In relation to the convenience store, in this scenario it's Tesco's. The ground floor, we obviously count the full GFA, not just the usable space, and that's been calculated at about 289 square metres, and that comes in a provision of 14 and a half spaces, so we'll round that to 15. Currently there's 22 being proposed with a disabled space included. So again, there is a sufficient there that we obviously couldn't raise any objections against. I think that kind of brings us on to the two main parts, parking and trip generation. And in relation to the network itself, again, so just to reiterate that there is an element we need to consider in relation to existing traffic on the network and it not actually being a trip generator or a trip attractor, pass-by and diverted trips. So in that case, highways and safety reasons, highways would not be able to object to an application that came in as a standalone in this situation.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Right, I'm now going to call on those who've registered to speak. We've got Clive Jones, Stephen Langdon and Quentin Taylor. I'm not sure how you're going to manage your total of 3 minutes between you, but I'll leave you to do that if you'd like to come up and speak. Thank you. As I say, if you press the grey button, that's when your time starts. Thank you.
Good evening. A month ago, my colleague from the Campaign for Real Ale spoke to you in an open meeting about the viability of the Maid Nova, its myriad of uses as a valued community facility and its potential loss without any consultation with local residents. These points remain unaltered and were enough to grant an Article 4 to stop an immediate conversion. In response to Tesco's private correspondence, the officers now appear to be suggesting your policies offer no protection to any pub at risk of closure. Every pub is a community facility, but under current planning rules, every pub also has an immediate alternative use, which can come around with no consultation and against the wishes of the local community. We believe that the National Planning Policy Framework is right to offer protection to pubs under threat of closure. There is also a clear statement in the core strategy that the loss of the pub as a community facility, if there is an alternative provision in the area, should be resisted. The officers seem to be denying the right of the Council to issue an Article 4 in these circumstances. As you are well aware, there can be more than one interpretation of planning policy, and we submit that the current reading by officers is unusually jaundiced. We urge the committee to stand by their original decision, taken democratically in an open meeting after robust debate for the right reasons, with a very clear majority. To reiterate, this is not an anti-Tesco or anti-supermarket issue. This issue is about the proper planning of a residential area and giving residents a say in the planning process about a valued community asset. You made the right decision last month, and we urge you not to just stand by it, but to drive it forward. Please do not allow the pub to be lost through indecision or deferral. To quote Eric Pickles, local authorities have the power through Article 4 to be sure that a change of use from pub to supermarket can be stopped. Use things, don't wait for things to happen, use the power that this gives.
I'm troubled by the weight that has apparently been placed on a set of draft minutes. The suggestion that the Council did not have regard to the appropriate factors when making an immediate direction seems to be based on the assumption that the minutes represent a complete account of the discussion at the last meeting. To use a summary, indeed a draft summary, as an accurate and complete account for legal purposes seems bizarre. Related to this, I'm puzzled as to what the material considerations not taken into account at the last committee meeting might be. So far as I can tell, there's nothing in the new report that was not discussed at the last meeting. If Tesco do hold a recording of the last meeting, as I've been led to believe, I would urge them to make it available to the Council so the matter could be clarified. It seems to me that the reason for issuing the Article 4 direction, as discussed at the last meeting, is that the development will be prejudicial to the proper planning of the area. There are many supermarkets in this area, but no other pub within the 900-metre radius. The pub has hosted numerous community activities in recent years, as summarised at the last meeting, and the suggestion on pages 93 to 94 of this report that if the pub reopened, these activities would not be offered seems bizarre. Surely the function of the pub is a meeting place where groups of friends can get together. It would be a strange pub indeed that did not allow this.
For me,
Give you 15, 20 seconds.
okay, thanks. Nothing has changed since the last meeting for me. There is a real threat to the local community that the post office could be lost. I have a real problem with the working and strategic transport model. It says that change of use would lead to approximately 26 extra vehicle trips in the afternoon and the evening. For me, that is nonsense. If that were true, the convenience store would not be economically viable. That would only be about £400 to £500 worth of turnover a day to Tesco. It wouldn't be viable. There will be lots more traffic.
Thank you very much. David Chopping as local board member. David.
Thank you, members. Last month I advised that Maiden Early is a classic late 1950s design development based around a balanced shopping centre, pub, primary and secondary schools. As proof, Early was elected to be the 5th best place in the country to live, and we would like you to keep it that way, please. You listened to our submissions and concurred with our request for an Article 4 declaration. Unfortunately, the short space of time between one application and the other has meant that a number of people have not been able, even at this stage, to give their responses, and that is both local schools and the Town Council. And I can also add to the comment made at the last meeting that the school, PTA, volleyball club and the WI committee can be added to the list of members. The law is very clear, an Article 4 declaration is not a prejudgment that planning consent will be rejected. It might well prove that consent is eventually granted, but then at that stage, and at that stage only, reasonable conditions can be imposed. I'm surprised Tesco's want to alienate their potential clientele in this way. This second hearing gives us the opportunity to raise some of the points overlooked in officers' reports which justify the request for a proper planning application. We would have the opportunity to ensure reasonable hours of operation. Do we know what the delivery schedule will be? We already have problems elsewhere in Early with deliveries, particularly with Asda. Incidentally, there used to be 2 entrances into the pub. More than 20 years ago, following an accident and a number of near misses, concern was raised about the delivery and customer access to the pub and safety of the school children. As a result, the entrance from Silverdale Road into the pub was closed on safety grounds. This was done with the agreement of the owners of the pub and the publican at that time. The entrance has remained shut ever since. We don't want it reopened. We want a proper road safety audit, not a casual aside comment. At the time of the accident, the schools only had some 1,400 pupils between them. We now have 2,200. Do we know what Tesco's intend to do about access? Well, their latest additional application indicates they want to reopen this access. I did ask officers to carry out a site inspection during school time. No description of this in the report. I can see another accident in the making unless proper access and road safety plans are drawn up and adhered to. We have put out a questionnaire, over 3,000 properties, and we've had 140 responses before the website collapsed yesterday. Answers are very clear, with about 93% against another supermarket. 95% of residents expressed their concern for the post office and chemists. There's also a long list of residents' comments, and 95% want a true community pub for the whole family. We have campaigned successfully in the past to keep our post office, which is located in another shop. We suspect this will put at risk. May I just finish by reading out one comment from a couple who wrote in, because not everybody uses email. They say, we're frequent users of the post office and chemist where both render excellent service. Being over 75, we should be lost without them. Just like you to think about that when you make your decision. Thank you all.
Thank you, David. That's the end of the people registered to speak. Before the committee members come on to debate and attempt to determine this, I think it's probably useful if I just try and provide some clarification and summary of some of the things. Clearly, we've heard from a number of local residents and elected representatives that this is not something that the people want to lose. The role of this planning committee is to apply the planning rules, not to consider matters about property ownership or the availability of local facilities. I have every sympathy with people's wish to want to keep those, but the planning committee's role is to interpret local and national planning law fairly. It's also not our role to change that national or local planning law. There's a proper procedure to change those policies. So whilst many people would think it is quite wrong that a change of use within the A class allows somebody to go from being a pub to a shop, or a pub to, for instance, a solicitor's office, without any planning permission required whatsoever, I think that's wrong. But that is what the law currently says. So we need to apply the law as it stands, members. The other issue that was raised, for instance, just as an example, though, I think I might mention on there that, for instance, a house, if there was a private house that somebody wanted to change into being a pub, that would require a change of planning permission. Similarly, if somebody wanted to close the maiden over and turn it into a private house, that would require a change of permission. It's a different class of use. But changing from a pub to retail is the same category of use. And as an example of that, barely 12 months ago, this committee considered an application in the Norris ward where a pub was changed to a Sainsbury's. And that went through, again, because there weren't issues regarding an Article 4 on that. Now, there's also been talked about that it is a valued community asset, and the government introduced legislation a couple of years ago that allowed members of the public to register buildings as a community asset. And in fact, I think this was done at the White House School, the private school. That only unfortunately applies to freehold properties or properties on long lease. And again, the law says that because the lease on this building that Tesco has signed is less than 20 years, that doesn't apply. The other issue is the value of it as a community facility. It's very important that we do not make as a committee a distinction between the same category of community facility. A pub clearly is a valued asset. A retail outlet, regardless of the brand name above the door, is also a valued community asset to many communities. So, members, let's hear what you have to say about it. I'll start with Rochelle.
What will be the risk to the taxpayers of Wokingham? Will it be several £1 million if we lose this on appeal?
I'll ask those better legally qualified than me to answer, but I think it will be fair to say that any numbers that are quoted are highly speculative, because we don't know that if this was challenged in court as a matter of course, that Tesco's would win. But we have received very clear advice from Queen's Counsel that they believe that our position will be extremely weak. And it's up to committee to put some weight on that, but actually ask Mary or Shara to perhaps comment on that. You need to use the microphone.
Yeah, sure. Well, there's two issues. I mean, if the decision to make
a direction was sustained and not reconsidered and overturned, then the decision could be challenged. It would depend on what basis it were to be challenged. My advice previously was that the committee hadn't had regard to the relevant factors, the relevant tests. There's a slightly different issue here today because the committee is going to have regard to the relevant factors, but the clear advice from the planning officers is that there is no threat to amenity and there is no planning harm. That being so, there could be a challenge on irrationality grounds. If that were to succeed and the council were to lose and Tesco were bringing the challenge, they would no doubt have a higher cost which this council would have to bear. There is another element of compensation or payment, and that is if the direction were confirmed and made and Tesco then made a planning application which the council refused, then the council would have to pay for any loss that Tesco had sustained as a consequence of the loss of those rights which the government has given it. That, based on its lease and any particular detriment it suffers, could be any amount. I don't know what that would be. It may be that others know, but it could be substantial.
Many millions of pounds of the taxpayers' hard-earned money.
It will certainly be the taxpayers' money.
Can I speak later?
Yep, okay. Bob?
Yeah, thanks, Simon. I'm still having trouble with this because I thought we discussed the immunity and the proper planning of the area last time, but obviously we didn't, according to the summary minutes. Talking about the immunity and the proper planning of the area, are we able to take in consideration the potential loss of trade or loss of facilities in the area? Like I'm thinking of the convenience store, post office, chemist, etc., etc. Are we allowed to take that into account? And also, I want to take issue with Claire's comment about the pub is open to 11 o'clock. Most Tesco's convenience stores are open to 11 o'clock from very early in the morning as well. And also, I'm still very concerned from what David brought up about the entrance to Silverdale Road. I mean, I know the area quite well. And I would be horrified from some of the Tesco's lorries trying to get into the entrance that's been stopped up. I don't think it would be safe at all. Is that something we can consider? Thank you.
Would you like to answer the first part?
I'll answer the first part, absolutely. The way that you have to look at this is to apply your policy. You have to apply your development plan and you have to apply national policy. In terms of your development plan supports this type of facility in this area. Therefore, the impact on other facilities, in a sense, is difficult to square with your own policies because you support this type of policy. But even if you set that aside, which you shouldn't do because you have to apply the development plan, but even if you did, there is no evidence at all that there would in fact be the closing of the post office or the chemist or anywhere else. There simply isn't an evidential basis for that. So it would be extremely risky for the council to take that position.
So could you talk about the hours?
Chairman, yes. What we have to do here in applying the assessment in terms of noise disturbance is look at one use compared to another. So we have to look at the likelihood of a pub and how that's likely to be used relative to a retail store. And in making that assessment, it is considered that irrespective of it, whether or not it's Tesco's or anybody else, that a pub is more likely to be busier during the evening, and it's also more likely to have more people there later on in the evening, and also leaving en masse at certain times than what a retail store would be. Therefore, the potential, and it is a potential, is that it has the opportunity to cause more disturbance and noise. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
The entrance, traffic safety.
The traffic safety issue, would you like to comment on this stopped up road?
I think all I can add is that under the Article 4, the transfer from the land use to the land use obviously doesn't take those elements into consideration. From obviously knowing the site, I've over the last couple of days, and from having a look at it, it hasn't been fully reinstated, drop curb taken out, footpath put back. It purely is some posts and chains, which doesn't legally state that access has been stopped up. It still exists, and the pub could open that tomorrow if it wished.
As a pub?
As a pub, or whatever is going to be there.
Right. Chris?
Thank you, Chair. I have no doubt that the local residents in Burley want to keep their pub, and Councillor David Chopping has spoken very eloquently twice, even moving it this evening, about his concerns about the pub. But including the various points he made, for example, about the entrance to Tesco's, but I believe, as Claire's indicated, these are not planning matters that we can consider. So what it comes down to, I think, is there a loss of amenity through converting the pub into a convenience store. I remember last week mention was made that certain facilities are offered in the pub, ancillary to its main function, but those could not be guaranteed by the local planning authority, so they can't be taken into account. So the loss of those could not be taken into account. So it comes down to, is a changing of the building from a pub to a convenience store a loss of amenity in the area, and I found it difficult to substantiate the proposal that in some way the pub is better than Tesco's. A lot of people shop in Tesco's, and a lot of people, local people, go to the pub. Despite what the local people clearly want, I don't see in planning terms how we can support this logic with more direction.
Thank you. At the 20th of August Planning Committee, there was considerable discussion on this topic, and a number of questions about the process were raised. I'm therefore disappointed to find out that there was an alternative option open to the Planning Committee that was not advised at that time. However, that said, we are where we are. A number of councillors raised concerns about the impact the store would have on existing businesses, and I believe due attention was taken about these concerns prior to the decision taken on the 20th of August. I also believe the action taken on the 20th of August would have been taken irrespective of who the retail business was involved. I'm not surprised but disappointed by the action taken by Tesco since the last planning committee. If Tesco instead had indicated that they would allow the local community X months to see if they could put a viable proposal together for the Maiden Over Public House, and that if after this X months period no proposal was forthcoming, they, Tesco, would then be put in a planning application for the supermarket. This would have been good publicity for them, as it would have shown that they cared about the local community and its concerns. This, I feel, could apply to any business in a similar position. However, Tesco has decided to highlight to Woking Borough Council the potential for damages if the decision taken on the 20th of August is not set aside. In my opinion, once a business, in this case Tesco, has taken such an approach, it could have the effect of upsetting a significant part of the community, the very people Tesco need to use their store. Their approach could therefore end up scoring an own goal. I also feel that their approach here, and that taken by a Tesco store in Great Yarmouth, where they wanted to shoot a pied wagtail that had taken residence in the store, are symptomatic of the problems the current regime are experiencing. I also believe that the old Tesco, under previous management, would not have taken this approach.
Okay, any other members wishing to speak? John?
I find myself in a difficult position here, having voted for it last time. No doubt the policy, national and our own policy, was written with a view to protecting and commercialising the borough and making things work. These are unforeseen circumstances, and no matter what happens tonight, I would like to ask the head of development to look at the possibility of how we can extend protection to pubs, and if necessary try and change our policy.
Malcolm?
When we discussed it the last week on the 20th of August, we were very supportive of the local residents. Obviously, they wanted the local pub to remain, and they felt that would be more useful than the supermarket. And all their hearts and minds were with them, and the decision was made. We also thought that all those reasons we had were perfectly valid and would stand up. However, we've subsequently found the reasons we thought perfectly valid, although they may still seem valid, are open to challenge and legal argument. And the consequences of us not having a stronger case would be a problem for finances and for the residents of the borough.
Just come back on your point, John. Obviously, as you know, you and I went to see the Housing Minister in Parliament earlier this year to lobby on another matter of planning law, and there was some progress on that. So maybe it's time for another visit to encourage them to look at the way the use classes can be moved without planning permission.
I would welcome that opportunity, Simon.
So members, I'm sorry, Michelle.
As much as I would rather see an Article 4 be used here, I just don't think that we have really good planning reasons to do it. And in spite of the fact that the residents are not particularly fond of this idea, I don't think we have a choice.
I think probably worth reminding both members and the audience that it's not unusual as planning committee for me to say whoever comes to the planning committee on every planning application, somebody's inevitably going to go unhappy because there's usually two different sides being represented. The danger, of course, members, is that if we simply respond to opposition and don't have the necessary tools to defend that position, you know what's happened previously. And typically what's happened in those cases, there's been a lot of opposition to a planning application. The officers have said there are no grounds under the planning law to refuse it, but members have chosen to ignore that advice and have refused it. The applicant then goes to appeal, wins at appeal, we get costs awarded against us, we get the development anyway, and we end up with a lousy set of planning conditions put in by the planning inspector which doesn't note particular circumstances of it. So you end up with the best, or worst of all cases, really, circumstances. And my worry is in this case is that I can hear very clearly the strong local opposition to this proposal. But as the law stands, and as a result of advice that we've had from the highest level, that this is not actually a position that we will be able to sustain in court. I'm seeing no other members indicating an alternative proposal, so I'm going to put the proposal as it stands, which is the officer's recommendation is that the proposed Article 4 on Maiden Public House should be declined, refused. Members wishing to support that recommendation, please indicate.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Jim.
That's 6. And Lindsay and Bob, are you wishing to vote against or to abstain?
Abstain.
Abstain. Abstain. So that is, the Article 4 is declined. There are 4 planning applications in the pipeline which will be considered by the planning officers, 4 Tesco's, which will give local people the opportunity to pass comment on the more detailed aspects of their proposal. It won't alter the fact that that facility can now operate as a Tesco. There will be planning permissions coming forward. There are minor applications, but everybody in the community is entitled to pass comment on those, and it is possible even that those decisions will come to planning committee if local member wants to. David is already indicating, because of the level of public interest, that they will come to committee for consideration. Thank you, members, for your forbearance. We now move on to item 47. If there are people in the audience who wish to leave now, could you? We move on.
We can't nominate assets it's not on the long list. It's being we can't do it.
Sorry, hello, people please settle down so we can carry on with the meeting, thank you. Right, we now come on to item 47, which is a tree preservation order detailed on page 10. Members, this is a fairly routine matter, but as you know, tree preservation orders do have to be confirmed by the planning committee, and I'm going to invite Chris Hannington as presenting. Chris Hannington, the officer, is going to present this item that starts on page 10 of your agenda, and the item after that will be the Ridgeway application.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a very simple case. A tree. Sorry. Great. Thank you. This is a very straightforward tree preservation order that we're requesting the committee confirms and makes. The tree is a large 25 metre plus plane tree in the grounds of TS Guardian, the training facility for Sea Scouts or Sea Cadets. There are proposals to upgrade the training facility, including drainage works, which have the potential to damage the tree unless the tree is protected. I understand that the owners, TS Guardian, are not objecting to the tree preservation order, but there is one objection from an adjacent owner. The tree has been inspected by the senior tree officer and is found to be in good health, and therefore we're requesting that the committee approves the tree preservation order.
Members, as I said, I think this is a fairly routine one. I think it's just worth drawing to your attention the neighbour who has written this letter is on page 13. He's concerned about maintenance of the tree. Obviously, just because a tree has a tree preservation order, that doesn't stop it being maintained. The owner, in this case TS Guardian, can at any time apply for works to be done to the tree, and it would be unreasonable for the council to refuse that if those works are related to the health or safety of the tree or the risk to surrounding properties. But trees are large, and if they fall on houses, they cause lots of damage. But generally speaking, they don't. So, Bob.
Yeah, just a couple of quick points. I know Richard, the objector, is going to kill me as it's in my ward, and I'm not going to support his objection. But I just want to point out that, you know, trees do move in high winds. Very often that's the way they stay there, and they don't automatically snap off. It's their way of preserving themselves. And they do shed leaves and twigs. And I'm sure the tree was there when you bought the house.
Okay.
I was going to make a point that you made. You can, well, ultimately you can fell a tree and TPO on if it's dangerous. But I was just going to ask the officer whether some attempt was made to talk to Mr. Fletcher to perhaps point that out to him so he might have withdrawn his objection.
Mr. Chairman, I'm a bit of a disadvantage in that I'm extremely new to the council. I'm sure an attempt was made, but I'd have to verify that. I can't confirm that.
Tom?
I was just going to say that TS Guardian obviously have a responsibility to make sure the tree's safe, I assume, as it's theirs. And it looks like on the report a very healthy tree. Could you just confirm that?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I can confirm that the tree officer found the tree to be in good health, and their report is pages 14 and 15. And if you turn it sideways and look at the bottom of the long handwritten screed there, no major dead wood, foliage dense and even, indicating good vitality. Yes, it's a tree in good health as far as we can tell. Thank you.
Okay, members, so we have a valid tree preservation order that's up for confirmation. Could members please indicate whether they're wishing to support confirmation of that tree preservation order? And that is unanimous. Thank you, members. We now come on to the planning application 59 Ridgeway. Members attended 7 of the 8 members of the planning committee present attended a site visit at this location and reviewed the host dwelling from the rear and then viewed the side elevation of the dwelling from adjoining land and were able to form their opinions and views on that. And I think, Jenny, you're going to be reporting on this one, so I'll go straight over to you.
Just
just again for information for members, the site is shown outlined in red on the plan here. Also just for information, this is the plan of the previous planning application that was refused, with the two-storey element going forward of the main house line. Just for comparison, for ease of comparison, on the left-hand side you can see the refused scheme, and on the right-hand side the current proposal, which has the first floor in line with the existing house. And again, just for clarity, the proposal that was refused on the left with the amended proposal that you're looking at tonight on the right-hand side, with the first floor extension now in line with the main house. Just again to remind members about the reasons for refusal. 4 reasons for refusal. The first was to do with scale, mass layout and failure to appear subordinate to the original house, and projection forward of the front elevation of the house being detrimental to the appearance of a house and street scene, impact on the adjacent row of mature conifers, insufficient information on car parking spaces and insufficient information on facts. And just as a reminder, no new reasons for refusal can be added to the reasons for refusal on the previous scheme. Just for clarity again, the hatched areas here show the single storey and the lined areas the 2-storey. The extension is 20.6 metres from number 29 that backs onto the site and 16.8 from number 61. Just to go in more detail on the current proposal, the main change is the fact that the first floor extension now lines up with the main front wall of the house. The single storey front extension lines up with the front bay window. The trees and landscape issue, it's accepted that trees on the adjoining land would be lost because the proposal is only 300 millimetres from the site boundary. But those trees are not considered to be of a quality that justifies a TPO, and therefore doesn't constitute a reason for refusal that we could defend. And this also shows you the proposed landscaping, which is the vertical climbing creepers. The existing property has a single-storey garage, a single garage. There's parking space in front of that. And also an area of grass creep, which is shown on here hatched, would provide a second parking space in addition to the garage and existing space. That survey was submitted with this particular plan application and found no evidence of bounce. And just, there's a couple of matters of clarification for members. If you have a look in the report on page 23, it refers to the 2-storey part being sited 7.2 metres from the boundary of 58. That should read 57, Ridgeway. Just for clarity. Also for clarity, there is a tree retention condition, but there are some trees actually on the site that are already dead or in pretty poor health, so it may need some replacement planting, just so you're aware on that. And one further thing which I'd like to draw to members' attention, there was a letter submitted with the planning application from the applicant to the neighbour at number 61, volunteering to provide some replacement trees for those which would be lost. Obviously, because they're not on land subject to the red line, we can't require that by condition, but the applicant obviously just wished you to be aware that he had volunteered to do that off his own bat. And then if any further questions.
Thank you. Bob, would you first as local ward member? Oh, sorry, jumping ahead of myself. Yeah. Sorry, could I invite Caroline Hopkins, local resident? Apologies. You'll come and speak, and this is not to do with you. we saw that when we made the site visit as well.
I can speak on, yes, you would have.
You press the grey button when you're ready to speak.
Sorry.
One in the middle.
I'm the owner of 63 Ridgeway, and I wish to object to this application on the following basis. The two-storey side extension does not satisfy the requirements of the adopted design guide, which states side extensions should follow detailed guidance for rear extensions, where they are sited close to a boundary. A gap should be retained between the building and site boundary, and this should be a minimum of 1 metre in width. There is no exception to this noted on page 56 of the design guide. There is nothing to suggest a 1 metre gap only applies to application where there is a terracing effect. The recent consent at number 69 Ridgeway in fact illustrates that, even in those circumstances where there is no overlooking, the new extension is separated from the boundary by 1 metre. This also serves to provide for direct access to the rear garden, which the proposal for 59 does not, unlike all properties in the vicinity. The design is not in keeping with the character of the area. The design guide states the properties in formal suburbia, whether detached, semi-detached or short terrace, the rhythm of buildings and the gaps between them along the street frontage is often important to the character of the area. Side extension should be set back from the building line by at least 1 metre, preferably with a lower roof line, and should be set 1 metre from the boundary. This application site is typical of the corner plots in the estate and is relatively narrow to give clearance between its side and the adjacent properties of 63 and 61 Ridgeway, which are recessed into the corner of the street scene, and which will face the full width of the proposed large two-storey side extension at the end of their driveways. The proposal overdevelops the site to create a larger corner plot house and is out of keeping with the existing character of the area. Apart from closing the gap, it will affect the outlook of the properties facing the application site, who do not have the benefit of the leafy street scene. The extension is not being built between houses similar to the example cited in 69 Ridgeway, where the outlook from adjacent properties are not affected. Other extensions within the existing street pattern are subservient to the original house, with the exception of 69, and all remain 1 metre from the boundary. The design of the extension has a negative impact on neighbouring properties and their established trees and landscape. The placement of 2 large windows in the side boundary wall is both contrary to design guidance and overlook directly the front elevations of 63 and 61. According to the design guide, the side walls of extension must not contain windows, especially at first floor level, to minimise any potential impact on the privacy of neighbours. Some side extensions in the area.
Could you just summarise very briefly, please?
There has been no safeguarding in the proposals of the trees on my land. There are no trees within the site, despite my request in July that they should not be affected.
Thank you very much. Can I now invite Nick Kirby, agent of the applicant?
Chairman, we are supportive of your comprehensive officer's report recommending approval for this application. It has been established in the officer's recommendation that the proposed development would result in no harm to neighbouring amenity through overlooking, loss of light or overbearing impacts. Council has requested confirmation at the July committee on 2 aspects of the proposal: the separation of the extension with the south-east side boundary and the potential impact on the trees alongside this boundary. The officer's report prepared for this committee has clarified these matters, and I can confirm that this is an accurate reflection of the proposal and site. In relation to the first of these issues, the existing garage currently sits on the south-east side boundary. The proposed side extension will be set in from the existing garage position with a 300mm separation from the south-east side boundary.
This allows the overhang of the main roof and the proposed soft landscaping to be accommodated within the applicant's ownership. An objection has been received from number 63 Ridgeway relating to the appearance of the side elevation of the extension facing their property. The applicant wrote to the objector before making the current application, offering to supply replacement planting to screen the development. Unfortunately, the objector declined to comment on preferences to propose soft landscaping until after the current application has been determined. Number 63 also objects on grounds the extension will cause a loss of light and an appearance of overbearing to their property. Officers have confirmed that the proposal exceeds the Council's design guidance in terms of daylight and separation distances. The applicant also proposes to introduce creeping plants to grow on the east side elevation to soften the view of the proposed extension from number 63. The applicant does not propose to remove any trees as part of the proposal, but does recognise that 2 of the adjacent conifers and 2 self-seeded sycamore trees on the boundary will be damaged by the extensions as discussed. These trees are already growing out of the garage foundations of number 59, with the 2 conifers causing noticeable damage to the applicant's driveway already. Officers have confirmed these trees are of no particular merit and that their attention is not required for the development to accord with planning policy. Therefore, I would emphasise that the loss of these trees remains a civil matter that must be dealt with outside of the planning process by agreement between the applicant and respective owner. Considering the poor quality of these trees and their unsustainably close and overbearing relationship with the applicant's property, their loss in the long term and replacement with the proposed soft landscaping would not harm the character of the area. All other trees at the front and along the boundary line would be unaffected and would remain. I hope this clarification has been useful and that you will agree with the recommendations of the Council's professional officers. Thank you.
Thank you. Very timely finish. Right, we have no other people registered to speak. Bob, I'll come to you first as local board member.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this is a difficult site, and I do recognise that the question of the trees and also of access to the rear of the property is going to be a civil matter between the owners of 61 and 63. It's not something we can actually take account of as planning committee. However, I just want to pick up on something the agent said. He said he wrote to the objector at number 63. I thought we heard from the planning officer that he'd written to number 61. So please can we have clarification who he did actually write to? And he also stated that it met the borough design guide. It doesn't. The 22-metre separation is not mentioned, not met. It comes to 20.6, which is not considered significant, which is a subjective decision. If we are I find time and time again there's only a guideline. Now we either have guidance or we don't. If we keep trying to, bring the things down a bit, it's beginning to get annoying. The boundary is marked by the wood that comes out the current garage at the minute, and that site plan is not accurate because it actually curves in towards the current driveway. It's not a straight line straight down to the road. Number 69 has been mentioned as a precedent. Number 69 is a fair way away from the houses that face it. Number 63 is not that far away, and I personally, when I stood there and looked at it, thought I would like to live there and look at that, but whether that technically means it's overbearing, I don't know. I'm still thinking about that one. Okay.
Okay, I think we'll just try and get answers to some of those. So, I think, Bob, you said it yourself that there seems to be some dispute and lack of clarity on the issue of boundaries, and that is not a matter for the committee because, as I often say, you've heard me say it many times before, I could make a planning application on somebody else's to build something in someone else's back garden. I could well even get planning permission. Doesn't allow me to build it because you'd use the civil law to prevent me from doing that. So the ownership issues about strips of land is not something the committee is going to consider, nor should it. The side to flank, Bob mentioned 22 metres, isn't that back to back?
Yeah,
Could
right, Chairman.
we just get clarification on that?
Yes, certainly, Chairman. Yes, just to clarify, the road design guide talks, there's not actually a specific requirement or guideline in the road design guide relating to the relationship of side to front. However, the back to back is 22 and the front to front is 10. So this is approximately 20.
20.6.
So it nearly meets back to back even, but it's actually a side to front, which I suppose in an argument it's quite similar to a front to front because it's windows and windows. You know, side windows on this particular extension relative to the front windows on the neighbouring properties.
Okay. Can I just come back on the flank to flank, on front to flank? I remember us having a discussion on this quite a couple of years ago, and we were going to address it in the new borough design guide, and obviously we both missed it.
That particular instance, Chairman, I remember the distance was 11 metres, and we considered at that time that 11 metres was sufficient because it actually means front to front, which is essentially the same. The thing is with guidelines, Chairman, through you, is that it's so difficult to unfortunately, with planning applications, every development is different. And every piece of land is different, and how it relates to its neighbours is different. So what you need to be able to do is have guidelines. They are not rules. That's the problem. They are not rules. We can apply them as consistently as possible, but the kick time and time again, and I know you've heard me say this before, you're probably sick to your back teeth and hearing me say it. However, we have to demonstrate harm, and those harm issues are those that we need to assess. In this instance, there of the reference, Chairman, was not meeting guidelines, not just in respect of the distance and the separation distances, but also in respect of the design. They're not set down, not set back, and not set in. And again, we have to establish whether or not there's harm resulting from that. In the report, officers are clear that they feel there is not significant harm resulting from that, not least because the development is adjacent to an area of open space, and therefore we cannot resort to terracing effect from this proposal because there's nothing to terrace with. There's a gap to the front of the houses. Thank you, Chairman.
Rochelle and then Lindsay.
Is the reason again for the not using the 1 metre because it's not a terracing effect, but wasn't the 1 metre, does the 1 metre specifically say terracing effect only, or does it say 1 metre from the boundary period? And it would seem like if we're doing 1 metre from the boundary, it's not. Second of all, these side windows obscure glass so they don't overlook the property.
Right. On the 1 metre, I'll refer you to a recent site we visited in Early, where the building was built right to the boundary, so there is no restriction on doing that. Okay, and in terms of windows with obscure glass, Jenny, the flank wall, obviously the upper floor window is a larger window than what is currently there and will be nearer to adjoining properties. What is the, I don't see anything in the conditions relating to that glass.
There doesn't look like there's a condition, but we could add one. The first floor window is a bathroom window, so it would be quite usual for us to add an obscure glaze, non-opening except top level condition on that.
That would be the norm, so I think we'd like to see that added to that too.
Can I also just clarify, sorry, I do have the letter from the neighbour and it is 63, not 61. My eyesight must be worse than I thought.
Thank you. All right, Lindsay?
Yes. In some ways, this site reminded me of a site in Woodley, in Brecon Road, in as much as that the height of 61 and 63 is lower than the property where the application's from. And I remember looking at that site and looking at it, and suddenly there was this great big wall. And I think that has similarities, because if you bring the two-storey forward, whilst it may be 20.6 metres, it is actually with a level difference, so it is like looking up at something in front. So I have immense sympathy with that, and I question whether that is actually not overbearing, because it feels it. Another point, on page 28, on the reasons list, number 6, I think there needs to be some changes there because it seems to run out of, it doesn't quite make sense right at the end. It says to secure the protection throughout the time that development is being carried out of trees, shrubs and hedges growing within the site which are of immediate value to the
Area.
Oh, it's area.
Yeah.
Okay. It's the right
Clarify that.
Okay. I think is that reason this is that one of the conditions? Is that a subset of condition 7? If it is, I'm wondering what activities one can do by protecting anything when you're building within 300 metres of the land and therefore quite close to a tree, albeit not one TRO. Just wondering.
Could you just clarify that? What your question is there?
I'm just wondering whether whether strengthen that. It doesn't feel quite strong enough to secure the protection. Is it a standard one as well? Oh, pardon me, because it didn't quite make sense at the end. Is probably what's put me on.
Chairman, we are happy with the conditions. Having looked at those, I think that they are sufficient to require what I think members are asking.
All right. Any other members wishing to speak on this?
Could I just ask a technical question, and it's one I meant to ask Mary outside of the meeting, but I'll ask her now. What's the legal definition of the building line? Because the bay window, I always understood the building line to be the main wall of the house, and if you come in front of that, that's outside the building line. Is that correct, or am I mistaken?
Claire, as you think there is one. There's no legal, that's the problem, there's no pure legal definition. I think, tell me how you work with that, Claire.
Okay, that's fine. I think it's difficult because it is one of those, it's an assessment. I would always look at a predominant line within the street scene, for example. But I would tend to say that the main building line it's not quite as precise as what we probably think it is. It's more about its positioning relative to the front, to the back edge of the footway, how it relates to the street generally. And often when you talk about building line, you talk about the kind of relative relationship with its neighbours as well. So you don't just take a building line of one property in isolation. If you're looking at it in terms of definition of forward of the main part of the property for PD, I think that's different, and I think you almost would take the most forward position in that instance. But I don't think that's probably what you're asking.
That's more helpful.
If I also clarify, it's quite possible for a property to have more than one building line. And, you know, in this case where you've got the front bay window and the main wall of the house, in effect you could argue either of them were or both of them were.
Right, members, I see no one else indicating to speak. There's been no alternative proposal put forward. So, you could if you wish. Yeah.
I'm still thinking about this, but I'm minded to think that it's overbearing. I think the size of the plot that's going to be left with the depth of the garden and everything else, I think it's just massive for that area of the estate, and I'm minded, on balance, to refuse it on being overbearing.
So you're putting forward a proposal that it should be refused on the grounds that the proposed extension is overbearing. Is anybody prepared to second that? Lindsay is prepared to second that. So we have to put that to the vote. Are members prepared to support a proposal to refuse this on the grounds that it is overbearing? All those wishing to indicate, please show. That's 3. Those against?
4, 10,
so that's 3, 5. So that's not carried. Therefore, we come to the substantive item, which is the application that's detailed in front of you, F2014-0945. With the conditions contained in the report. Members wishing to support that, please indicate. 6. And wishing to go against? Okay. So that application is approved by 6 votes to 2. Thank you, members. We now move on to Copse Mead in Woodley.
Chairman, there was a condition with regards to the window.
Yes,
was that included?
Right. Right, members, thank you. So we now come on to application 29 Copse Mead in Woodley, which is the proposed erection of a part 2-storey, part single-storey rear extension and 2-storey side extension. Members attended a site visit last Friday. 7 of the 8 members present tonight attended the site visit, and they viewed the property from the rear garden of the host property, and they viewed it from the rear garden and inside of the immediate neighbours' properties on each side. David, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Application 29 Copse Mead. Begin by showing you the location plan. In terms of this particular application, there is some background to this scheme, and there was a refused application which was refused based on neighbour impact. That was the previous scheme. As you can see, there was a 12-metre rear extension proposed, as well as a first floor side extension up to the boundary of 31, as well as a garage in the front of the plot. We did object to that scheme, and for comparison purposes I put that against what's proposed now. You'll notice a few of the changes. Up against 31, there's a removal of the first floor extension because that was on the boundary, and that submission has kept it as it is at the moment. So the extensions are focused to the rear of the plot and on the side. You can see from the plan there's an existing garage which will be demolished as part of the scheme, which abuts the boundary of number 27. The garage that was proposed towards the front has also been removed from the scheme, as this was quite significantly forward of the building line. I've summarised the key dimensions of the extensions in paragraph 11, which is page 54. When you look at those distances, I've noted the distances to each boundaries. It's worth pointing out, I know it's been mentioned already this evening, but in terms of the Borough Design Guide recommendations, in terms of neighbour impact and street scene, we do have a recommendation about the metre separation to the boundary. And also, I'll quote from the Design Guide, there was mention of extensions not exceeding a depth of 4 metres when located close to boundaries. As I've mentioned in the report, attempts have been made to design a scheme now which fits that criteria. Looking into the specifics of the scheme, firstly, members did view the property from number 27, and we noted the ground floor side-facing window. We had a secondary kitchen window, a cloakroom window, and at first floor level, as you can see in the picture, we've got the bedroom window at first floor level. And the report does look into the impact in terms of loss of light and overbearing on that window, and does conclude that there is a sufficient separation distance to not warrant any impact. Secondly, the report then looks at overlooking from first floor windows that are proposed. I'll just show you a plan very quickly. So there's 2 first floor windows proposed in the side elevation. Both will be obscure glazed, and you can see a condition in relation to that. The other neighbour, number 31, again, members were taken on site here. We've got the nearest ground floor rear facing window serving a lounge, and plans have shown obviously a staggering of the extensions and 45-degree line, which is uninterrupted from that window. Again, we've concluded no significant impact. Just lastly, in terms of the character, we've concluded that there are a range of property types. And number 28 is of note along the street. In terms of the design, we haven't raised an objection. We've commented in paragraph 5 that the proposed extension seeks to reinforce the symmetry provided by the proposed front gable projection, which you can see here, which is being proposed. Lastly, in terms of highways, there's a driveway which can accommodate 4 cars, which isn't changing. There is an increase in the number of bedrooms, but given that provision off the road, we don't raise an objection and therefore conclude that this should be recommended for conditional approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. We have 3 people to speak. Firstly, could I invite Mary Walker from Woodley Town Council to speak? Okay. Good evening.
We as a council, we as a council would recommend refusal of this application. Copse Mead is a private road with a variety of individually styled properties, as you mentioned, on generous sized plots, which gives the feeling of space and privacy. The impression one gets when entering the road is one of neatness, with all vehicles parked on the driveways of the properties. The planned extension to number 29 would make this property considerably larger than those on either side, and with the raised roof level would also be higher. This would result in overdevelopment of the plot and be very overbearing on the properties on either side. It would extend almost the full width of the property, making the side access quite narrow. The back of the property, which is at present level with those on either side, would extend at its deepest some 7 metres beyond them. This would result in considerable loss of light to the neighbouring properties, and the windows and doors planned on both sides would also create a loss of privacy. The large number of bedrooms and bathrooms suggests that at some stage there could be multiple occupancy, which would result in a number of vehicles with insufficient parking on the site. As this property was previously extended some years ago when it was almost doubled in size, this extension would make it nearly 4 times the floor space of the original build and be totally out of keeping with the other properties in the road. We're also unclear from the plans about the position of waste pipes and vents for the bathrooms on the boundary wall, and are unable to ascertain whether these would impinge on the neighbouring property. To sum up, Woodley Town Council would strongly recommend refusal on the grounds of overdevelopment of the plot, the massing effect on the neighbouring properties and the subsequent loss of light. We would also recommend that if you did see fit to allow the extension, a condition stating that the house could not be used as a house of multiple occupancy be put in place, as this would be the only property of its type on the street and would be out of character with the rest of the street.
Thank you very much. And could I now ask Mr. Wade, a local resident?
Just hit one of the buttons if that's all right. I've got my son sitting behind me. Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Good, before I make my case here, with your indulgence, I'm 87 years old, to briefly, before the 3-minute rule, bring to your attention a serious matter which is not actually part of the planning application. It's my opinion that the planning process employed by the planning authority is prejudicial against the elderly and infirm. We have no computer and rely entirely on written words. Twice I have not received communications other objectors have. For instance, I only learned of the recommendation from my neighbour, who was told by Councillor Baker some days before I received a letter. I then phoned the planning officer asking the grounds for this. He refused to give me the grounds for the. He refused to give me these grounds in spite of my pressing him. It was not until this morning that the council sent a copy of these. Obviously, far too late for me to deal with these tonight. Thank you, sir.
Did you wish to speak at all about the application itself?
Sorry, I'm wrong.
Yes, please.
Okay, would you like to go ahead?
As I tend to mumble at my age, I wondered whether it would be a good idea to give the committee a copy of what I'm saying. And I will give them here.
Do you want them now or shall I hand them out to you? If you could hand them out now, yeah.
Not sure it's enough to go. There's some more. Thank you more.
We're okay here.
You're okay?
Yeah, we need to make some progress now.
Right, I will do my best. I will do my best. I'll start now. As a chartered surveyor, I have detailed my objections in 2 previous letters. Copse Mead is a private road with an active residents association which owns and maintains it. The houses are all attached on plots from 50 feet to over 100 feet wide. Number 27, where I've lived for 57 years, adjoins the applicants. It was planned in proportion to the plot and depends entirely on light from the windows on all 4 elevations. The current application is basically the same as the original, with a minor adjustment, a meagre reduction in size of just 8%. It still extends 7 metres behind the rear of my house and indeed the others on the whole side of the road. The extension in width on 2 stories would remain within 1 metre of my property and within 7 inches of the boundary of Mr. Cheng. Mr. Cheng's asked me to speak on his behalf. His objections have also been detailed in his solicitor's letter, which emphasises the proposal legally contravenes the borough's core strategy, CP3A. The extension would reduce the natural light in his lounge, thus requiring electric lighting for an extra hour a day. There would be unacceptable loss of privacy to his patio. Number 29's proposed 3rd extension quadruples the original building to over 4,400 square feet. The size and accommodation, that is, of 5 to 6 bedrooms, possibly with 2 more on the 2nd floor, 5 bathrooms and 7 WCs, indicates multiple occupation. Hence additional concerns such as drainage, noise and parking. Numerous objections from other residents, particularly Mr. Turner, FRIBA, who has designed and built 12 houses in the road, Mr. Bingham, then chairman of the Residents Association, and Mrs. Bradwell are particularly important. Succinctly, my objections include, but are not limited to, 1, overdevelopment, the area of the property to site size, 2, an unacceptable and non-conforming width, presenting a terrace-like appearance, 3, significant overshadowing of my house and garden, 4, unwarranted loss of privacy, 5, new noise fumes from the 1 metre proximity of 5 windows overlooking my house, including those from the kitchen, 2 bathrooms, 3 WCs. Those windows, 3 of those windows have been added since the original application. 6, major loss of light to my kitchen, breakfast room and cloakroom. 7, and this is difficult for me to put forward, loss of light and privacy to my wife's restroom on the 1st floor. From this room, the sky would no longer be visible. This is a fact. You saw the room, and if you stand there, you cannot see the sky.
Could I ask you to summarise now? Because
I will be as quick as I can, but I hope you will realise at my age that is difficult. Sorry?
I couldn't agree with you.
Yeah.
Do you want me to read it out quickly?
Yes.
Yeah, you have already had more than double the normal amount.
That's very good, isn't it?
Very good advice.
Yes, thank
Basically,
you.
my
Thank you,
father's my mother's care ruins her restaurant, and it would have I believe, an impact on her long-term health and
Yes, we
well-being.
understood that.
In summary, the re-application has already been recommended for refusal by Woodley Town Council. It legally contravenes the borough's core strategy CP3 Alpha, and a like application on the other side of my father's house has previously been refused. And there are many errors and inaccuracies in the application. Importantly, the recommendation of approval is incorrect, as the officer's report and the grounds for refusal of the initial application still apply. He would like to quote from the case file: contrary to core strategy policies, side extension on unbroken line, small concession has been made, and overbearing, unneighbourly and contrary to character to the neighbourhood, and it's harmful. Past it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Archie.
And now Kate Haynes as local ward member.
Thank you. From looking at the new plan submitted, it can be seen that the applicant has made some steps to rectify previous objections, like the removal of the front garage, which was in front of the building line. However, the problem with massing a load of development is still huge. The width of the single-storey part of the rear extension has been reduced very slightly by 1 metre. The depth of that part of the rear extension remains unchanged. There's been no change to the location or size of the 2-storey part of the extension, which is still located only 2.5 metres from the boundary line of number 31, with a proposed height of 7.7 metres and a depth of 4 metres. Furthermore, despite the minor reduction to the width of the single-storey rear extension, I fail to see how the extension will not have an adverse impact upon the amenities of the surrounding properties, given that the 2-storey extension remains as previously proposed. The extension still projects 7 metres from the rear wall instead of the recommended 4. The slight increase in distance from the boundary of the single-storey part will not result in any less an imposing and dominant structure, which will result in a substantial loss of light and amenity currently enjoyed by the neighbouring properties. There is still no mention of the recreational room, which will alter the ridge line of the property, and no amendment to the plans have addressed concerns relating to privacy. Overall, there's a significant increase in volume of the new house compared to the old, which makes it very overbearing on the neighbours. If the application is granted, the site will be overdeveloped, as the proposal is to extend both to the rear and side of the house, and is contrary to CP3A of the core strategy. In addition, the original form of the building would be lost to the over-dominant extension. The current plans could be seen as disproportionate to the needs of this family of 4. The plans include a loft conversion with a raised roof, 5 bedrooms and 5 bathrooms, dressing rooms, etc., which could lend the house to being converted into 5 bedsits and therefore becoming a house of multiple occupancy. I respectfully ask that should you be minded to approve this application, you do anything that can be done to safeguard this for the future, possibly through a condition banning HMOs. Therefore, the Council should not grant planning permission for a proposal that is contrary to its own design guide. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Right, members, before we come on to discuss this, I think we should not pursue the issue about house and multiple occupation, because that is, to the best of my knowledge, anyone is free to build a house, providing they have permission, which has a range of accommodation, and we don't sit at this planning committee making judgments about what might happen in the future. So if this house becomes a house of multiple occupation in the future, that is something that would probably require permission anyway.
Just to clarify, Simon, the rules state that within the C3 use class, you can change from a single dwelling house to a HMO for up to 6 persons. 7 or more is a different use class and would require planning permission.
So that is something members should ignore. Right, members wishing to speak. Who wishes to speak on this? Rochelle, firstly.
Just a point of clarification. The gentleman here said it's only 7 inches, which is considerably less than the 1 metre distance to number 31.
It's 2.5 metres is a separation to number 31. That's a 2-storey rear extension.
7 inches, they're talking that.
And I could just bring up the plan on the main screen. So this is number 31 here, and the extension is outlined in red. So there is 2.5 metres and then a 4 metre set in at single-storey level.
I think I recall on the site visit that in the corner nearest to number 31, that gap that's shown there's actually a width of a patio window there.
Well, this section isn't changing. That's
No,
also already on the boundary, so that won't change. Yeah.
That clarify? Members wishing to speak? Sorry, Tim.
Yeah, can I just come back to you on that? That response you gave for the HMO, because I just recalled we had a house in Woodley probably about 3 or 4 committees ago when they wanted to introduce a second person to be renting, and that had to come here. But you've just sort of suggested you can have 6 and not.
You can comment on that.
Chairman, yes, that was in response to a condition placed on the upon that particular property by members following concerns issued or raised at our planning committee. Officers' advice is that we don't condition that unless there's any specific planning reasons to do so, mainly around parking and traffic. And I think in this instance there are 4 parking spaces on the front, but we can see no planning grounds on which to recommend that members place a condition on this property restricting it to be used as a HMO. In the event that it's over 6 people, then even if it goes to bed sits, planning permission will be required, and we can control that in the normal way. And I think that particular case, which is the one you remember, I don't think officers suggested in that instance that there be that condition placed on there. It was a requirement of members at that particular time.
Thank you. John?
I guess tonight we're learning that there's common sense and planning rules. I'm in a house with seven toilets and 5 bedrooms. It's, I would say, somewhat excessive. I would like to see that condition placed on this house, to be quite honest with you. The other thing is, looking at the plan, I didn't go on the site visit, I must say that, but it does look like overdevelopment to me. One of the things I'd like to ask, I believe it's been extended significantly initially, and now we're seeing a second extension. Now, how does that sit with the borough guidelines with regards to extensions? Because if you can just keep on adding to it, obviously 40% added to a house that's 40% bigger, is there any rules around that?
Do we get some comments on the cumulative effect of extensions?
Well, this property in the past has had a single storey and then a first floor built over it. Clearly, originally, if you're looking at the rear building line, it was actually set quite far in. There aren't any percentage increases. We have that rule within, or guidance within the countryside, but as this is within the settlement, there isn't any cap on the level you could increase a property. But that's captured by the other tests which I've mentioned, so that the 45-degree line and other separation tests.
Chris?
Thank you. I'm confused about what overdevelopment actually means here. Is it what's visible from the road? Is the proposed development at the rear of the property relevant? How would you define overdevelopment?
Well, the rear gardens of these properties, they are the public realm. People are experiencing the development, but you know, in order to refuse an application, we'd need to identify some sort of harm in terms of either loss of light, overbearing or overlooking. On the site visit, we did point out a property, I think it was about 2 doors down, that did have...
35 probably.
Yes, it's probably captured better on this scheme here, but again we've got projection that goes beyond the rear building line, and that was obviously pointed out on site. But I think if there is resistance to this, there needs to be some sort of expression of how it causes a loss of light or an overbearing impact or an overlooking impact.
I think sort of what I've heard so far from members is that they have reservations about this proposal. Clearly any extension is going to have an impact on neighbours to some extent or other, either by being closer, taller, introducing more people to the property. That's a fact of life with extensions. What we need to look at is the harm, and whether that harm is sufficiently significant to allow us to consider an alternative proposal. So, Bob?
Yeah, I'd just like to pick up on that point, Simon, because I think we heard from Mr. Wade that it will severely affect the room that his wife uses, and I think that is significant harm to his, to their amenity and to her amenity. And I think we do have a grounds for refusal on that alone. I'd also like to comment on CP3A, how that fails, and I know this is going to be flippant, but I'd like to know if the house is going to be renamed as Travel Lodge.
Okay. Can we get some clarity on CP3A has been consistent with mentioned, and could we get some clarity as how, in the officer's professional opinion, that it's compliant with CP3A? Lindsay, we'll take your point in the meantime if you wish to speak. Okay.
Two of them Bob actually Bob actually raised, but I just wrote down here when I was going through this extension is huge, and I don't use that word very often. I feel that it feels a gross overdevelopment, which has been mentioned, of the site. When we went to 27, the lighting 27 wasn't brilliant now, and I could imagine the building there and looking up that it would be very much overlooked. 27 is an older property and is smaller, and it would look like a pinprick next to a great mansion. And I think that it really does look sort of out of proportion. And I think if you turn to the diagram on page 60, that really does emphasise the size of this building. And I just think it is taking probably the maximum extremes that you can do for both all the areas we got, and this is what they come up with. I think it is very inappropriate. And I would even go forward to propose that we refuse it on gross overdevelopment.
Okay, well, let's hear what others have to say, and then we'll come to that. Michelle?
Since we have done in traveller sites and other places restricted occupancy to families, can we restrict this to families to eliminate HMO development of this particular site? Since we have done this elsewhere and would be in the past, is there any reason we can't do it now?
Okay. Mary, could you make a comment on that, from a legal perspective?
Sorry, you're asking whether we could restrict it to
a family in the house. We don't care how extended the family is, but to a family as opposed to multiple occupancy, since we have done this to other sites, in particular the councillor's house in Woodley.
I'm struggling to find that would be reasonable. But what is it about this particular house and family that you would want to restrict it?
Just the five bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, 7 loos. It does sound like it's designed for multiple occupancy to a lot of lodgers or something like this, rather than just a family, unless it's a very, very large family.
I think unfortunately, Councillor, to it's hard to do that. So they may have a big family and need bedrooms. I think Claire's already explained that we've already got mechanisms in place to prevent multi-bed sits, if that's what you're concerned
But
about.
if it's just lodgers, they could have
Yeah.
they could have 4 lodgers in there or something like
And I
this, and
think-
that would considerably increase the number of spaces they need for cars and things like this.
Yeah, members, my advice would be, as I said at the start of this, that is not an area we should pursue, because I think if we're on dangerous grounds. I think if there's sound planning reasons that you think in terms of overdevelopment, those are the sort of things we should be pursuing, because that is a matter of fact. You either think it's overdeveloped or it's not. We cannot speculate as to how the property is to be used. Okay, Claire, we're going to come back on. Did you want to add a bit more?
I was only going to add something that Claire pointed out just earlier on, and she went through it very briefly, but we did do it once. I think we'll remember which one it was, and there were traffic problems because of the nature of the road. So I think if there were reasonable grounds like traffic issues, but no, sorry, Claire's shaking her head. I'm not sure that we can find a planning reason to do that. I'm sorry.
Okay, right. Claire, Chris, would you just comment on the traffic aspect, and then we'll get this a bit of clarity on CP3A, which has been repeatedly mentioned.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure there was the need for me to be drawn into this part of the conversation, but in relation to, it's obviously stated there's 4 parking spaces, but I have to follow to looking at the plans here. The front garden is approximately 15 metres by 15 metres, which could substantially take a number of more vehicles. There appears to be 2 accesses, so there is likely to reduce the element of reversing out onto the road. There's also to draw the attention that it's a private road and not an adopted road, and therefore the biggest concern we have is where that private road actually connects in with the adopted public highway. So obviously there's nothing stopping them, as they probably own at least half of that road in front of the property, to even park on that section of the road themselves.
Kevin, I finally found CP3 and I'll read it out. It is the one which talks about general principles for development, and it can apply to a whole range of things. And CP3A refers to, I'll read it, Planning Commission will be granted proposals that are of an appropriate scale of activity, mass, layout, built form, height, materials and character to the area, together with high quality design that detriment to the amenities of adjoining land uses, including open spaces, occupiers and their quality of life. Now, there are 2 issues there, essentially. One is about the scale, mass, bulk, visual issues associated with that, and the other one is about the impact of those things upon the amenity of occupiers. The report does actually assess those issues, and I share members' concerns to a certain extent about the scale of this, and I'll just relay back some of the comments that and discussions I've had with the case officer on this, because I saw it and I thought, oh gosh, it looks a bit big. And I spoke to the case officer who showed me the photographs when we went, after he'd been on site, he's considered it. And actually, having spoken to that case officer and the reasons why, in my view, I don't think we'd be able to stand a straight refusal on the basis of A, visual amenity, and B, upon neighbour impact. Yes, I think it potentially will have an element of impact upon the neighbours in terms of maybe the loss of outlook. However, it generally complies with our guidelines, and although we have to make that assessment against what we would normally accept, and in this instance, I can't see any basis on which to justify refusal on the back of that particular policy. I think that it's not. I did actually say to the case officer, is this an unbalanced suspicion? His advice was, no, I don't think it is. I think it's not something we'll be able to justify.
Just building on that, Claire, I mean, if you look, obviously that policy is in place, we have to have a generic policy for all of that. Just looking at the specifics of the site, I mean, if members were inclined to have an overdevelopment reason, obviously an inspector would be minded to look at the depth of that plot, the size of the plot, the fact that it's not backing onto other neighbouring properties, it's backing onto the railway line. There clearly is scope for an extension here. And then we go into the realms of what our guidance says, and in terms of the specific specifics of the site, it might be difficult to defend an overdevelopment reason.
John?
About the issue with regards to being out of character, we've heard evidence tonight from residents that it will change the character of the road.
I've included, I haven't obviously been able to get photos of all of the street, but and I've got, I think it's number 28, which is about 3 doors down, further along the road on the opposite side, a more recent dwelling, but there's a real variety of detached, semi-detached properties, bungalows, so there wasn't a specific design cue that this particular development would take.
Mr. Chairman, point of order, there are no semi-detached houses in the red.
Thank you. Okay. Bob?
Yeah, I just want to take issue with Claire's comment about about CP3A, because it does this without detriment to the amenities of adjoining land users, including open spaces or occupiers and their quality of life. Now, if this doesn't affect the quality of life of Mr. Wade's wife in that room, I don't know what does.
Sorry, just to clarify, that was correct, that interruption there. It's a range of chalet bungalows and bungalows with detached dwellings. There aren't any semi-detached properties. Obviously, we have looked into the neighbour impacts in terms of separation distances. There's a 5 metre distance between the window number 27 and the proposals, and obviously we've taken the view that that won't be detrimental.
I think, as I said earlier, any extension is inevitably going to have some detrimental impact on neighbours. It's just the very nature of making a building bigger, larger, taller. It's the question of the harm and the scale of that detriment. So, Chris.
The previous application, which was refused by officer delegation, I guess, was there a reason for refusal there relating to overbearing on 27?
Yes, there was in that previous scheme. As I say, we can bring up that proposal and the comparison between the two. In this case, it was that unbroken length, that 12 metre unbroken length, which was highlighted as particularly harmful. Obviously, in this case, and that was unbroken length within a metre of the boundary. Here we have what I call a staggering design, so that as the extension increases in depth, so does the distance from the boundary.
Is it the same height, the old and the new, on that side?
Yes, so looking at the comparison, so you've got this is a single story projection from the rear wall going back 12 metres. The height is the same. The single story section, obviously we have a 2-story section here, which has been proposed, which is 1 metre from the boundary. So that's the main difference.
Okay. Right. Members, now's your chance if you wish to put an alternative proposal to that has been put forward. Lindsay, have you got a proposal?
Yes, I would like
to use your microphone.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I would like to make a recommendation to refuse on using CP3A, because I think I'd like to read this out again, because I think it's quite important. CP3A states, planning permission will be granted for proposals that are of an appropriate scale of activity, mass, layout, built form, height, materials and character to the area, together with a high quality of design without detriment to the amenities of adjoining land users, including open spaces or occupiers and their quality of life. Having been to 27, I think that the big building that would be the result of this would have quite an impact, an overbearing be right over the top of it, and I think it would take quite a considerable amount of light out of it. So I think that we could could support it under CP3A to refuse. When you read the words.
Yeah, sure. Just one moment. So I think what we're hearing then is that the elements of CP3A is overbearing, loss of light. Those are the principles. Are there any other bits of that?
For the detriment to the
quality of life.
Quality of life of Mr. Wade's wife.
Okay. So members, proposal to put forward to somebody wishing to second that. Bob. So we have sorry.
We just talked about number 27, aren't we?
Well, I think it affects 31 as well.
You need that.
You could make it less likely to win if you've got 31.
27. My advice is you concentrate on 27.
27, yes. 27 was the one I was most interested in.
Right. Okay. So we have a valid proposal that's been proposed and seconded. Sorry, John. We need to take this vote.
Chairman, I would like, and I've never done this before, but I'm going to abstain because I didn't go on the site visit, and if we're going to talk about overbearing, it's very difficult for me to make a judgment.
Okay, I think that's a wise decision, John. So we have a valid proposal proposing refusal on the grounds that it's particularly contrary to character and right under CP3A. Members wishing to support that proposal to refuse, please indicate. 5, and those against? Myself, Tim. So that application is refused. 5 votes to 2, 1 abstention, and I suspect that will be tested as well.
What's quality of life as well?
Okay, yeah, we've got that down. Thank you, Bob. So that application is refused. Just for the benefit of the residents who are here, of course, this is only one part of the process. I have no doubt that the applicant will probably take this to appeal, and as you may know, this is one area of planning where only one party has a right of appeal. So if the planning inspector makes a decision in your favour, that's firm. If he makes a decision that supports the council's original position, that is also firm, and there's no right of appeal to that. So good luck.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, we'll have a 2-minute comfort break so we can then continue with the rest of the meeting. Comfort.